Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my podcast, The Good, the Bad, and the Future of Social Media. I am here today with my cousin, Jason. It's a very exciting episode because we've been planning it for a long time.
Way too long.
But we do have some great information on mental health, and we wanted to talk about it because he'll give you a more in-depth reason as to why we're doing this right now, but it isn't, in my opinion, it isn't talked about as much on social media as it should be. And we have been through it and we want to create this open conversation. So we think that why not start now? I have this platform, let's use it and let's open this conversation and see who we can touch on. But with that being said, I do want to also mention that if we are not professionals, so this conversation is going to be an open conversation on mental health, but if anything in this conversation is triggering or hits you in a certain way, and because we are not professionals, we would hope that you do seek professional help, because we are not, but we are just here to open the conversation. So yes, we're going to start off with, this is my cousin Jason, obviously, but he's going to tell you his goal of this conversation and how he because he did reach out to me about this, and of course I was so open with it, but he does have goals in this conversation. So let's hear what those goals are.
What an introduction. what an introduction. Well, first I was thinking about this too. I meant to mention, first I want to lay out how Sarah did such a good job of actually when I came to her, she wanted to break down the podcast and really wanted to get straight to what we wanted to talk about. And I think that's quite important, especially to make sure we actually can touch on as many points as possible. Mm-hmm. So I guess we'll just start by I can say how this came about. Mm-hmm. So what happened was it actually spurred from Bell Let's Talk Day. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, I don't love Bell Let's Talk Day, but that's a whole other topic. Okay. But it just spurred from this idea of awareness, especially through social media. So one of the things I really do enjoy about Instagram and other platforms like that is this ability to actually reach out to many people. You can ask for recommendations on stuff, or you can actually talk about very personal topics. So I posted, as you know, on my story.
Was it on Bell Let's Talk Day?
It was was I let it brew and think about it for a bit of time. And I even had this in my notes on Bell Let's Talk Day, but I was like, you know what? I don't really want to do it on that day. Mm-hmm. I want it to be separate from that, because for me with Bell Let's Talk, it's turned a lot more into feels like publicity for Bell, and I don't love that aspect. So I wanted it to be more about the mental health aspect. Mm-hmm. So
totally agree. That's a great,
right? Yeah. That's kind of how I started to see that day, unfortunately. I love the intention behind it, but it kind of seems to have gone the wrong way.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So love the idea that you can post, and I posted about basically with mental health. And I basically said, I reached out and said, would love if people could talk about mental health with me, specifically mental illnesses and struggles they've had, medication they've taken and stuff like that. And Sarah was one of the people that responded to me. And what's amazing is I added it all up and wrote it in my notes, because I started a Google Doc about this. Mm-hmm. And there were 78 people.
Which is incredible,
that responded to me.
I mean, we both know that not a lot of people talk about that kind of stuff. Yeah. So for all those people to reach out to you, and I think that, especially in our generation, we need to talk about it.
Yep.
So yes, I'm very glad
it was amazing, right? As I told you this, and you were just your face when I told you this before, you were pure shock. Because and it was in different ways. It was through some of them through Facebook, some through Instagram, some of them texting.
And you said it. Some people weren't even people that you've met yet.
Yeah. They were just I hadn't even met before. Exactly. And they told me all their whole stories, or I met them once and they told me their whole story and everything, and it was just beautiful, and the willingness to be very vulnerable and open and honest, just absolutely amazing.
And it wasn't just you went out of your way to even answer these people and talk to each and every one, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Because the answers that you even gave me, we had a full conversation. Yeah. And sometimes especially 78 people coming to you, it's hard to, spend the time to answer each and every person and in depth.
Yeah. That's a great point.
So
honestly.
we're coming to you with a lot of information.
I know that's also why, in fairness, we talked about how we pushed this back a little bit till now. It's definitely because I was trying to gather that information as much as possible. And that was quite an extensive process. Yeah. And I was willing to do it, and I love doing it, because it's just I really enjoy opening the conversation and hearing these perspectives from people, and because I'm learning, they're learning. It's beautiful. It's really needed. It's that next step that we need.
I totally agree. Let's start the conversation. Let's not make it something that people are scared to talk about. And we are going to start that conversation with us. And we've been through things ourselves, and we are being open and honest and going to tell our experiences, all difficulties, what we have had to go through. And hopefully you guys resonate with something or hear something that you've been through, someone around you's been through, what we were kind of talking about. And we said, we just wanted to help, and we want people to think like, okay, it's not just me and I'm not going through this alone, and it is okay to talk about.
Yeah. And one thing I remember like even before this, we had discussed just before the podcast, because we were trying to like lay this out a little bit. It's not like, I think we've done a really good job in recent time bringing up the topic of mental health and actually making it a lot more accepting and easier to talk about. But I think now it's time to really look for the next step, to ask that question, to figure out what is it that person needs, or how did you feel, if they're comfortable sharing, of course.
And I'm excited because obviously I know some stuff, like I feel like some things are more so talked about than others. I want to say like anxiety, I've heard a lot about, and a lot of people around me, but I feel like some other ones are less talked about. And I'm sure you're going to introduce some, because you've even named all the ones that you're going to talk about today that we will get into shortly. But I don't even know much about it. So I'm very curious to hear. And then...
Sounds good.
So I hope everyone is open ears for this conversation. So take us through what was going through your head when you put out that post.
Yeah. So I definitely want to touch on this too. So this is where it's really interesting to me, because I don't know where this is going to take it with all this information, because I basically now gathered all those stories that people have sent to me, and all this information they provided on all these different mental illnesses and their coping strategies and the stigmas and stuff. And I don't know where it's going to go, but I do know, like, I started to lay out what were the goals, because it was almost like an instinct thing that I wanted to do, because mental health has become so prevalent for me, especially in the past 4 years or so. And we'll talk even a little bit more when we talk about ourselves and mental health. So I'll explain that in further depth. But I think some of the goals I wanted to, that I realized in hindsight and also in the moment, what I was trying to look for was trying to open up that second step of the conversation, trying to ask people what do they need for help, or also try and find similarities with me to try and find help for me. Like I want it to be a back and forth. I want it to be so that we're supporting each other through, just like, for example, this person tried this medication and it didn't really help them for these reasons because of the side effects or whatever reason. And then I'm kind of like, oh, okay, well, maybe I should maybe not steer away from that a little bit, even though each medication is obviously different for each person. Yeah. But it's like just these kinds of things that I think, to be honest, to be fully honest, when I laid out this question for people, is because I have been like really struggling with it. And I wanted to find some answers from other people. I wanted to like see that, to be honest, like that it's out there, like people, like this is a thing, because alone. I'm not alone. Honestly, like it's been really, really tough, like especially recently. So I think that's where it came to a head, and I was like, hey, let's post this. And
I know we'll get into our stories and we can do that soon. But for me, it does feel like when you're going through something, especially emotionally, you do feel like you're alone, you know, because it's such a big, overwhelming feeling of all the things that you're going through. So that is a very big thing to note too, is that you're not. Me and you are sitting here. We both go through something. Everyone is going through something, and we're not alone. There's so many people around us, and people do love you out there, and people want to hear it. Yep. So that's why if you don't have anyone to talk about it, listen to us.
Exactly. And I think just a couple of other things is I wanted to, it actually goes back to what you were saying before. I wanted people who don't really know about certain mental illnesses to learn about it, or even parents to like see this, go to this document and try and find a way to understand their kids better, or try to understand a relative better, anything, a friend better, just spreading information. But information that it's like, it's not, obviously none of this information is going to be based on facts, but it's going to be based on real stories from real people. And it's a bias, yes, but it's important information.
And we're not obviously going to give names of anyone. We're obviously keeping everything that we say here anonymous, other than me and you. But yeah, so these are real life stories, and these are real life people, and people are going through these things. So if anything touches you in any way, like just know that you're not alone. Yeah. So do you want to go into...
Yeah, I was about to say, let's hop into our stories.
Do you want to start off with yours?
I'll start off, yeah.
You go,
just because I can't stop talking. Okay. Yeah. And it's funny because we were talking about how long is this one going to take, this topic. And I'm like, I got this down to a science. I've talked about this so many times because you know me, I'm more than willing to talk about mental health.
Which is
general.
amazing.
So basically with me.
Take us back.
Yeah. Mental health was like mental health, mental illnesses, all of these different topics specifically, they became, I noticed I can always like pinpoint it. It was when I was going into fourth year at Ryerson for architecture, and I started to notice the first semester of fourth year, things just, it was like an underlying feeling of things feeling off. Like it was like, it felt like underlying sadness almost is kind of what it was. So.
But you didn't understand why.
And I didn't understand why. And it was like, it wasn't triggered by school or like because I've been through architecture school. It's a time,
It's
as you know through Ryerson Passion, like it's a lot. So
I think architecture is the hardest program.
It was pretty challenging. So I knew what it was like to feel like times were tough, but this was different. It was different. And So I went through the semester. I started to talk to my roommates a lot because that was something we did. We were very good with open conversations about this kind of stuff. And that was my outlet. My friends have always been my outlet to kind of like talk about this stuff. And they got to the point where they're like, you should maybe see a therapist. And like, not in a bad way. Like they were just like, I don't know what else to say at this point. I can only
help you so much.
Yeah. Cause like they are like, I don't have enough education on this and which is totally fair. So I went, and in February of like the following year, in like second semester, I went and found a therapist and started talking to her and just let everything out, just talked, explained.
And
she
were
just
you open with the first one that you kind of
I was extremely honest. And I think that's a key point because it's so important to be honest about our mental health. Like as much, like if we want to try and get as much help as we can get,
100%.
We just got to be honest with it. It's tough, but we got to do it. We got to do it.
And for those that like, some people don't, I've heard a lot of stories of people that don't have luck with their first ones. So just know that like, you know, there isn't just one. Yeah, not everyone finds it on their first one.
Yes.
But with you're so amazing that you did.
No, it worked well. Like I definitely took some time to like, that was important. Like take the time, ask around, ask friends. Cause a lot of people are seeing therapists,
Lot of people.
And there's a lot of different websites, resources. A lot of the therapists will actually call you and do like an interim session, a quick session. And then you can really get a feel out and be honest with that feel out and be like, I don't know if this works or this works. So went in, I did a brief session with her. It felt right, talked about, let it all out. And then one of the things she said, based on your stories, which were just based off of me just venting, talking about things, a lot of my actions were, she called it manic. And I hadn't really heard this word before. I didn't really understand
manic, because I don't understand.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's such a like interesting term. So as I've learned and researched and felt, manic is basically racing thoughts. It's like you're jittery. It's like things are going by very quickly. You're very energetic. You're very like, you're talking fast and you're like acting on spurs of emotions and like really like it's like high pace is the best way I can describe it. It's not, a lot of people think I can quickly disclaim it with bipolar, which is where we're headed, what I got diagnosed with. But a lot of people think it's just like happy and sad. It's like, no.
That's
it's
what I
exactly
thought.
right. Exactly. And this is something I definitely like to try and explain further, but the manic state that's not what it is really. It's like, yeah, you tend to be a little bit happier because you have the energy and you're like building off of that. But it's like it's like going to the top of the roller coaster with all this energy. And then this is why you crash so hard. Like you hit that depression and there's not much of a middle ground because you're like going like, and you're exerting so much energy. And that's like the manic state. It's like, and you do like impulsive things. Okay. So like you'll go, like obviously people like will impulsive buy stuff, but this is like to an obsessive extreme extent. Like you'll like go, and it's usually extended for longer periods of time. Like you'll usually be in this like state for longer. That's usually the definition of how you would define for bipolar. So basically she says this and she goes, okay, I'm going to send you to this, like as long as you're okay with it, to a psychiatrist, because psychiatrists are the only ones that can actually diagnose. Okay. So she sent me to the psychiatrist in Toronto that she just knows through, I think she's worked with them before, whatever it is. So based on that meeting with the psychiatrist, they said that the thing is, it's tough with these because like psychiatrists only have the limited amount of time, and like for them to diaggnose in a 1 hour conversation is very difficult. But that's why it's been difficult since then, because trying to figure out what it is that I have. Yeah. But diagnosed with bipolar at that point, bipolar disorder. At this point, I also already knew I had OCD and anxiety.
Yeah.
Those are things that I've noticed for years and years,
Yeah.
but I found coping mechanisms to deal with them. Like those ones I was able to, like, especially through architecture school, I had to try and learn to control my anxiety and my OCD, especially because, like, think of all the fine details when you're designing stuff and you want to do every last little like screw that goes into the building.
And you'd never get things finished if you didn't
Yeah.
figure out a
Yeah.
little way to, cope with those kind of things.
Exactly. So at that point, I then, I saw actually, like down the road a few months later, I did actually see another psychiatrist. So they also went through and had a same diagnosis for bipolar. So it did kind of reaffirm a little bit at that point.
Yeah.
But in between, just before this, I was in contact a lot more with my doctor. My doctor was my like solid foundation of someone I could keep talking to.
Yeah.
Even when I was on and off with therapists and stuff, my doctor, honestly, he's been like, major shout out to him, has been just very, very helpful and there consistently, because it's been very hard with trying to have consistent people to see, right?
Yeah.
So we tried originally anxiety medication because we're like, hey, and this is back when things were just feeling off. So we're like, okay, let's try out some anxiety medication, because that seemed to be the thing that was the byproduct of how I was feeling.
Yeah.
But I'm realizing in hindsight, it was the byproduct. It was like I was feeling this way, then it caused me to be anxious.
Okay.
It wasn't like the solid base was pure
Which makes
anxiety.
sense.
It was like anxiety because of this happening.
Yeah.
But I didn't see that in the moment, really.
Yeah.
So I tried 3 different anxiety medications. Side effects were unbearable. Like it was like I got vivid dreams. I was like major brain fog and very tired, like hard to fall asleep, but then hard to wake up. And it was like, how am I supposed to win at that?
Yeah.
So tried those 3, got the bipolar diagnosis. So we moved away from the anxiety medications, and then we moved into more the mood stabilizing medications. Since then, I have tried 6 different mood stabilizing medications.
Okay.
So this is where the journey really begins for me, because trying, like, I don't think
bet.
people realize, like, especially with the heavier medications for things like bipolar, 4 to 6 weeks to actually feel the effects of it. Then, and during that time,
Wow.
so much side effects. Like you have to deal with all the side effects. Now, some of them subside. Some of them, I still have vivid dreams from when I took anxiety medication. It has never gone away. Like major vivid dreams.
Okay.
So, some of them subside and then some of them don't. And then you want to try it for a few weeks to see how the medication is actually working. And then if it isn't, which almost every time so far that's been the case, then it takes another few weeks to actually come off the medication. So it's like a 2-month process. And you're trying to live a life in between this. You're trying to work.
You have
You're trying to go to
things do.
school.
Nothing just stops.
You're trying to talk to people. And it's like and like some of these medications, it feels like your brain is like fried. Like it's like you're trying to slowly process something and you're like, the words aren't really coming out the way that I really am like, I want something to happen here, but it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I was in between this. Like I said, I was working in an architecture firm. So I was doing stuff. I was like trying to live a life still while this is happening. I went and then I'm like, no, I still want to go do my master's in England. I want to do my master's of architecture.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want to do this. Like, even though all this is happening, still went over to England and then had to get a psychiatrist there, had to get medication there.
Yeah.
Even more of a disaster or challenge, at least. Then went through a semester at school there. And I thought maybe like a change of scenery, it would help, right? And I think a lot of people think that, but like I learned, at least for me specifically, it's all core.
Mm-hmm.
It's still there. Like, and especially when I was over in England and I was still feeling the exact same way in terms of like that, a little bit of a depressed state, like a constant depressed state, like underlying, like I can go out and have like an amazing time with friends. And then for days on end after that, I just like will feel terrible. I won't feel good.
Yeah.
And when I realized that after the first semester, I told my parents, I'm like, if it's okay, I kind of might defer here. I might like defer and come back and actually like take on my mental health.
And for you to say that, like it probably took a lot.
It took a lot. And I was worried. I didn't know like what people would think of me. Like, I don't know if you remember, but I don't know if you saw it. I posted on Facebook that whole post about deferring. And again, talk about responses. I got like 60 comments on that message. I got text messages. Like I basically, to explain, I posted and said, I'm deferring. I've been diagnosed with these things. I'm deferring because of my mental health, not because of COVID, because this is around COVID. A lot of people have asked me since too. Yeah.
In the beginning. Mm-hmm. So that probably took definitely a lot out of you.
Yeah. Yeah. And even then people have asked me and I'm honest about it. I'm like, why'd you defer? Was it COVID? I'm like, no, honestly, I've actually deferred because of my mental health. I really wanted to focus on it. And I knew I needed to come back to Canada to do that.
Yeah.
And so thankful I did. I did that and I deferred again. And I've been really like trying the different medications, talking to all the different psychiatrists, doing a lot of different like tests and stuff. And you know what? Even if it doesn't mean I've gotten to the point I want to yet, I've ruled out a lot of stuff along the way, which I think is also an important thing to note.
100%. You have to celebrate the little wins or what you have discovered, or, you know, getting a little bit better.
Yeah.
Which is very important.
And so I'm at the point where I still have a bit more to go, but I've decided to go back. As you know, like I'm going back to England in the fall.
Which is amazing.
And I'm excited. I'm so excited. But I still have a bit more to go. But you know what? I am really proud of like myself and how much I've learned about this and how much I've been willing to talk to people. A lot of it is though, like, because I've talked to so many people. I've talked about it.
Do you feel like you have a bit of weight off your shoulders now that you know?
Yes.
And you're like, okay, this is what I'm going through.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. For sure.
Now that I can sit here and really define what it is, because that's another big thing with mental health. It's so cloudy. And that's why I wanted to do this as well. I wanted to try and narrow down the information, find some overlaps in what people have responded to.
Overlaps, that's a perfect word to describe it.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
So yeah, that's the point I'm at. That's the point I've reached. And I realize that even say I find a medication that actually really helps the symptoms that I'm feeling, which we can go into that a bit more, but like the symptoms that I'm feeling, that it's still going to be a huge part of my life. Like it's just a reality. Like mental illness and mental health are just, I think obviously mental health is a big part for everyone, but the mental illness aspect is for me going to always be a big part of my life.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
even if I start to get it under a little bit more stabilized is a word I would say, not like solved.
Well, it's going to stay with you forever, you know? Yeah. Totally agree.
So I want to hear more about you, because I think what we also did is we made sure not to go too in depth beforehand about our mental health, so that we felt more like understanding of it. Yeah, exactly.
So opposite of you, actually, I don't talk about it with many people. I have obviously said to people like, I get anxious here and there, but I think a lot of people do get anxious. And mine kind of came about when it was during COVID. I know you know, and a lot of people do know that I am a very extroverted person. I get energy off of being around people and hanging around people. Like that's just my energy. I love it. I love like making people happy and all of that. So being indoors and being locked up with just a few people and not being able to go out and feed off of energy made me go a little insane.
Yeah. That's the thing I totally forgot to mention. That was a huge factor. COVID put me through the ringer. Both of us, because we're both so extroverted, as you can tell by us right now.
And so many other people are too. Like it was hard. It was very tough. And like we admitted it, but I didn't really know that it was like any different than until I started getting like this heavy chest. And I was like, oh my gosh, like doing anything or waking up, like I'm such a morning person. I'm so happy all the time. And I was like, oh, I don't want to get out of bed. And then my like chest felt heavy. And that's like the biggest thing I can say about like what I was going through. And then I started to, you know, not be able to do things because I was so heavy chested and deep breathing. And I didn't know what was happening to me. I'm like, this is so crazy. So I kind of explained it just like you to people, and people were like, I can only do so much. Like you need to like speak to someone about this, because it was like, you know, interrupting things that were happening in my life. So I called my doctor, and he was kind of easily, after I explained like how I was feeling and stuff, asked obviously a million questions, but it was over the phone because it was all during COVID. And he prescribed me medication for anxiety. And I went on it right away because I was like, I don't want to feel like this anymore. Like, let's just see if this helps.
Do you remember which medication it was?
I forget what it was called.
Yeah,
but
I wonder,
because
I feel like maybe
now.
I might have even done it too, because they usually use a lot of common ones for the anxiety.
Probably, I'm sure it was like a very familiar one because it was the first one I tried.
Yeah.
And it's known for a lot of people that have taken or tried out anxiety medication. The first week is very hard, and the last week's very hard. So like starting and ending it is very, very tough. So I tried it. You know, it was helping, but it wasn't, people around me and people in my life didn't agree with the medication. So it made me second guess it.
That's a great point. That's something I'm going to touch on too.
So I was like, okay, if they don't think I need it, then maybe I shouldn't be using it. Or if they don't agree with it, like maybe, and it was going too much in my head. So I'm like, you know what, like, let's just try a therapist. Cause everyone was like, if you don't want to do the medication, try therapy.
Yep.
And I've done therapy in the past. And I think that even if you don't need therapy, you need therapy. It helps with anything.
Yes.
But I did that, and I found someone that was so amazing, and I came off of the medication. People tell you how to come off of it, and you should obviously listen to them. But I did the opposite. I just stripped it right
honest,
away,
I've done
which
the same thing multiple times.
you go through the emotions, but been in therapy ever since. And I can easily say anxiety isn't gone. I still get anxious sometimes, but that heavy chest and that not wanting to get out of bed,
I have that too.
That's not there anymore.
Yeah.
So
that's good.
I'm very happy with it getting better. And obviously I think I'm going to have anxiety to a certain extent for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But I now have gone through things with her that my therapist that have helped, and I've kind of coped with it. And it's just like therapy is, I can't even explain how much it's helped me.
Yeah.
So obviously people can't find the best therapist right away, but if you do go through it and you find it,
it's worth taking the time, even if it takes a few different therapists, and being honest with yourself and recognizing like, hey, this therapist doesn't work for me.
And
that's
sometimes you have to be a little bit more honest than you want to be with your therapist.
Yes, you always do.
You gotta be brutally honest.
You have to, and like honestly, with our age, we do a lot of things that are questionable.
But I'm sure they've heard the most.
They've heard the most. That's actually so true.
They're on your side. They want to help.
They won't. That's exactly it. Okay, question. This one's gonna be like, I don't know. We'll see how this is.
Okay.
Do you feel there was a few like specific instances that really helped you come out of that feeling of the like were there certain like things that your therapist got you to do? Were there certain like stories you had to talk about that helped resolve it? If you're okay, that's a tough one that maybe to answer.
I don't think I can pinpoint a certain thing, but there was techniques that like she kind of went over, and obviously talking as to figuring out why, like what was the trigger and stuff. And I didn't even understand. Some of it was because of, not being able to, being stripped away from like having that energy that kind of built me up. Yeah. But just when I get into those anxious states, this is going to sound weird, but I always like put my hand on my chest just because it's like a comforting thing and take a deep breath. And I'm just like, okay, I'm here for me. Like
oh, that's good.
Yeah. So that has very much helped. And obviously talking to it with people and those around you, and like people that are just listening when you're like, okay, like this is how I'm feeling. And they're like, okay, well, it's going to be okay.
Listening and validating. That is so important. Like that's another thing I was going to talk about at some point too, is that one of my friends, when I was talking to them, they brought this up. Honestly, a lot of the time especially for me, it's like, I need advice sometimes, but please let me ask you for advice. Sometimes I just need you to listen and be like, you know what? That's happening. How can I help? But not like, this is what I think you should do. Like sometimes I don't need that.
I can totally agree, because sometimes it gets annoying. It's like, and it's like okay, like you. And
then you think too much about it. And you think too much about it. Cause then like, especially with me, I have so many thoughts, and I'm sure maybe with you too, going through my head already about trying to solve this, trying to work at this, trying to find solutions. You throwing more ideas in at that time is not going to, especially in a moment of like high anxiety, for example. You already have all this stuff happening, and it's overwhelming. It's too much, to be honest. Yeah.
And even like when I was speaking with you before we did this, like what came to my head was, if you don't know how to help, don't just shoot ideas out. Ask, how do you want me to help? I'm listening to you. Yep. I'm here. What would you like me to do? And we even said like, maybe it's, sit beside me for an hour and just don't like, I want you to just be here. I don't want to talk right now, but I want you to be here. Or what was an example
we talked about let's work out once a week. I'll drag you out of bed and I'll get you there. Because like workout and stuff like that is also really like helpful. Quick interject on that I just thought of, like things like eating healthy, drinking enough water have been things that mentally have helped me. And I didn't realize until I started doing it. Like even today, I started to like spiral a little bit mentally after we even like saw each other. Yeah. I had a full meal of dinner, I had some water, and it was like a full balanced meal of dinner.
Good.
And I started to be able to think again. Like it's like, it's all about my brain and like nourishing it. And also when I would work out before, when I did yoga before, it was like a cleanse. It was a cleanse. But to be honest, like the issue I had before is like sometimes that cleanse would only last like a half an hour, an hour. That was specific to me. But I do know that in general, doing stuff like that, it builds up, it adds out, and it adds up. And that's actually so important.
It's what works for you.
Yeah.
And there's, you can hear all these things from people online or even from us, and you can try it. If it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. Just because it works for us doesn't mean it's going to work for you.
Big point for this podcast, just us like talking this out and letting people resonate with whatever works for them.
Maybe a part of it will help and maybe a part of it won't. Like you just got to figure out what works for you. And in your lifestyle.
Yeah.
But I want to hear about some of the responses that you got. So
let's talk about that. So I have them all jotted here, so you'll see me looking at these a little bit.
No, go ahead.
But what I'll also just start with some of the questions I asked to each people once they responded to my Instagram story or texted me. I said, what are some of the symptoms that you feel from either your diagnosed mental illness or just like mentally, whatever you're experiencing, symptoms, stigma around mental illness and taking medication, the stigma around it, which is why you mentioned that before. Like that's an important topic. Then there is some of the side effects that you feel from the medications. So if you did start taking medications, some of the side effects, what are they though? Like, because the biggest thing, it's like for me, with these medications, and like, I always look at there's like, this is how I see it. I know it's kind of weird. There's me, there's my mental illnesses, which is usually the biggest prominent one is the bipolar / whatever that is. And then there's the medication. And all three of these things are like affecting me at various different times. And I try to sift through which one is it? Like, am I tired because it's a side effect of medication,
really?
Or am I tired because of the manic state I've been in, and then I like drop? What is it? Because like, and the reason it's kind of important because it's like how to address it is like, is it the medication that's not working? So I need to do that. Is it I didn't work out enough today? So is it me, the workout, or is it the medication I need to fix, or is it especially the medication? Because is it the side effects of the medication?
I've never heard about it, and thinking of it that way.
Yeah. So like. And obviously they're all part of me. There's that I'm encased these three things, but they feel very separate within my brain and within me, to be honest. It feels very separate. So, to go back to what I was saying. So then I asked like what medications they took because I wanted to hear like what were the specific medications. That's why I was curious just which one you were taking. It's not a big deal, but I was just curious.
I wish I remembered,
about
but it's been a while.
Because like sometimes like people took a couple of medications, sometimes people took one that worked for this amount of time and then it worked for these reasons. And that's the kind of stuff I wanted to learn about because I'm still seeking the right medication for myself, right? And then it was coping strategies. So whatever they may be, can literally be anything. Some of the stuff we've talked about, therapy especially, but different types of therapy. There's like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. There's also DBT, TMS. Like TMS is like, these ones are specific a little bit more for like bipolar or mood stabilizing or stuff like that. And then there's even like massage therapy, like things that are physical for your body. Like, and even like you talked to us before, like your getting ready routine is like a mental cleanse for yourself. So it's getting ready to go out, it's like a mental cleanse for yourself.
Meditation.
Yeah. So whatever that may be, that kind of stuff also is like, even if it's also a physical thing, like massage therapy too.
Hobbies.
Yes, hobbies. That's another great thing. Like me, I love sports is like what I would do to help get out of the house and just clear my mind a bit too. Cause like in sports, I don't have to think. I just have to like, I do have to think on the sport that I'm doing. But it's the one linear thing that you're focusing on, right? It's not all these thoughts pulled out from everywhere.
And running into your head.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Then there was talking about advice that person may give based on their experiences. And then I think what was the other thing? Yeah, like that was kind of the main things at the end. The advice was also the other part, just like advice on their own experiences. Cause it's like, that's what we're also trying to not necessarily give advice, but just like a perspective advice kind of thing based on what they've gone through.
If we think it's going to help, why not try it?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Okay. So let's hop into one of the ones that there's a couple of people that I've talked to over the years since I like had this diagnosis. Like, the nice part is since I talk about it so much, I'll tell like my mom and then she has a family friend. And then actually, this person. That's why it's so funny, but I shouldn't say besides the point. I know, besides the point. But like, do you see what I mean? It's like the network of connections and willing to talk about it is what's helped me find multiple different people to talk about it with because I'm able to mention it to people.
And if you're open about it, maybe somebody else will feel open about it too.
Yes.
And maybe you're the only person that's kind of got it out of them.
Yes, that's honestly, I've had people literally say that exact sentence to me. They said like, I haven't talked with anyone, but like I was really inspired by like my Facebook post or whatever.
Well, I've never had this big of a conversation with anybody about it.
Yeah.
So you're pulling it out of me.
I'm happy. No, I'm happy. Like that's what makes me genuinely like, it makes me so happy to hear that, to be honest. Cause like, that's what I want. Again, like even from me doing this, it's like, I want that person to feel comfortable and want to help them in whatever way it may be. Even if they don't know what it may be, even if I don't know what it may be, I just want to try and see if there's just throwing it out there, open the conversation. Cause one of the things I've always noticed,
quite literally amazing.
Yeah. Thank you. One of the things like I always noticed is that like when I have all these thoughts, the best way, especially cause I'm always all over the place with all my thoughts. The best thing for me is to talk it out loud. Even if sometimes I don't, like, I'm stubborn and don't want to do it. As soon as I do it, I'm like, oh yeah, I totally should have done that.
I totally need that.
And I'm like, why didn't I do that for the past like week? Okay, so yeah, let's choose a name.
Give us an example.
Let's choose a name for my friend. We're gonna go with Sarah. It's a very
Sarah.
No, that's too confusing.
Best name in the
I shouldn't do Sarah. We'll do Victoria. Okay, so Victoria got diagnosed with bipolar about I think it was about 5 years ago, 7 years ago. It's been a little bit. Mm-hmm. So my mom reached out and just happened to bring this up in conversation. And Victoria's parents were like, yeah, Victoria would totally be okay with like talking to you about it. Like, let's have a conversation. And I had never met Victoria before. And Victoria doesn't even live in Toronto. So she was more than willing to it was just such a like breath of fresh air to actually have someone else that's also like me and willing to talk about it and going through very, very similar things. Like it was like,
not the
I got
same,
goosebumps.
Similar.
No, you're right though. But like that type of idea, I got goosebumps when she started to explain. And even since I've talked to her since, and actually I talked to her since to add actual like notes down in this document. So it's actually like condensed somewhere. Cause before we were just like texting, calling, but now it's actually been like condensed to one spot, which is what I love about this process is that it's all condensed in one spot.
Yeah.
And some of the things she was saying, I was like, whoa, this is eerie because these are like things that I didn't even realize that I was feeling or experiencing.
Oh my gosh,
and she was feeling the exact, I'm like
yeah.
getting goosebumps right now is what it was. So let's talk about this because this is relevant for bipolar, for example. So also just a side note, there's two types of bipolars, bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. Okay. Bipolar 1 is very, very extreme. So that's the one where you'll have to spend more time in like a hospital and actually you need to be on a medication to function whatsoever.
Okay.
Bipolar 2, you can manage, you can get by. It's like a higher functioning version of bipolar 1. So basically that's just a quick overview of the two because people don't know that either, right? Yeah.
So thank you.
So and now the thing is that's also interesting. That is also a really important point with me. I've also since been diagnosed with ADHD. Throw that in the mix. But like these mental illnesses, how I view it as like they feed off each other. Like for example, remember I said like with anxiety, it was like an outcome of the things that were happening with bipolar.
Yeah.
So it's like, and then like my OCD will spur my anxiety. So say something's like out of place or a plan gets canceled on me, then I'll start to feel anxious or like people aren't showing up on time and I'm planning something and I get anxious. And I go to grab my chest because it's the same thing as what you talk about, that feeling. So it's like these things feed off each other. And Victoria, she has both OCD and bipolar. So that's very relevant for me. Yeah. And actually ADHD a bit as well, because actually ADHD and bipolar go pretty hand in hand, which I learned as well. So some of the things that she would want to do things, and like the OCD is something like, it's also OCD, quick side note, because this is also relevant to what she talked about. It's like this, like the key is obsessive compulsive disorder. For me, the obsessive part is like a very key aspect. OCD plays such a huge part of my life. Everything I'm looking at right now in this room is bothering me slightly, like just because it's, especially if things are not like parallel or perpendicular or doesn't feel right is the key word.
Okay.
I will be like, it's like my phone not being like this, like perpendicular to the table. It bothers me. And when things bother me, that's what brings out the anxiety. And for example, when I can't think straight and I can't have a conversation and I can't think in the logical OCD linear manner that I usually think in, I go crazy because it's
Would
like frustrating.
Help you at all to like say it out loud?
So this is what's interesting is that I've tried everything in the book, obviously, because I've talked to everyone and everything. So that's one thing I tried. I tried like talking it out loud, but this is where I started to realize how big a thing mental illnesses can be. So like, especially with me. So this is where I started to realize that I really do need medication because like it's not things like working out, things like talking it out loud are very temporary fixes.
Yeah.
unless I'm doing those back to back to back to back for the entire day. So I'm working out the entire day. It doesn't,
not realistic.
It doesn't, it's not realistic, right? And it's unfortunate, but it's like kind of a Band-Aid fix, which don't get me wrong, those are needed sometimes.
Yeah.
Like you are sometimes like so out of
Just
it that
reset.
it's just like, just something, you need something. Now that's the one thing is that I noticed it's like there's still this underlying problem. And actually the thing that we both kind of experience the most, Victoria and I, is this, like, especially with me, it's a physical feeling of a cloud in my head. Like I will like, and I'll know when it's happening. Right now I'm okay. Like I know, I'm serious. I know it's weird to say that, but I'll know. And then I start to feel like I'm dissociated from the scenario because it's like, I feel so absent-minded as to what's happening in front of me and I won't remember things. So like the next day, and this doesn't involve like any drinking or anything. Like I just like won't remember conversations or people's names or like people's faces. Like I like it's kind of scary a little bit. And then it makes me feel like I am not, and this is where the depression kind of comes in because like I'll almost oversee this person who's like laughing and having a good time, having good conversations, but I won't feel like I'm actually like feeling those things. Like I it's not physically like sitting there because my brain feels so fogged. It's almost like it's disconnecting from my emotions, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like so blocked that it's like the actual emotions, it's not like registering with the emotions. It's not like, it's almost like, oh, I see it, I feel it. And then it's like, but then it's like, nope, doesn't actually, that cord is not connected. It's not resonating with my body. I'm not feeling it. And then it's just like, it feels so hard to keep, that's where depression comes in too, like an underlying depression.
Well, yeah, because you're just so confused as to why that's happening.
Yeah, and it's saddening because you don't feel any, like you're like, I don't feel happy, I don't 100%. Feel things. So that was something that we both had in common. And it was also just nice to, like, weird, but nice to hear that exists in someone else.
Yeah, it's
someone
not
else
just
feels
me,
that.
I'm not alone.
It's because that's a really, like, you've probably never heard that your entire life.
No, I'm trying, I'm like, and I'm following it, but it's hard to, think about fully because I've never been through it.
Yeah.
So having somebody else that, fills in those holes or like finishes that sentence of what you're feeling is probably so relieving.
Yep, exactly. So some of the other things, so when we talked about stigmas, some of the points that Victoria brought up was just, it's similar to what we've talked about. It's good that we're talking about this, but at the same time, there's still underlying issues. And actually, I had another friend that I talked to as well. And again, also diagnosed with bipolar. And she also brought up some good points in terms of there's still like subconscious, like misunderstandings. It usually stems from misunderstandings. Like it's a misunderstanding of what bipolar is. So it's like, they'll be like, oh, I'm so bipolar today. I'm like happy and sad. And I'm like, do you know how much that frustrates me?
I mean, I've heard a lot of people that I know don't have it definitely say it. So I can understand
I get that you don't know it, but this is where I want to spread the information of what these things are, to be honest.
And people even listening now after hearing that probably will think twice after using that as like,
Yeah. And also this other thing of like, it's a tough one that I also noticed with some of the other people, anxiety. Like there is a difference between like being a little bit worried and like physically having an issue with like anxiety, like the physical feeling you feel. Some people just be like deadline season and they're freaking out.
Oh, for sure.
Honestly, it's not usually quite the same. It's not that I'm like discounting how they feel, but like it's not the same as like the symptoms that people with anxiety, like some of the people I talk to with anxiety, they will get crippling anxiety attacks and like they can't stop. They can't stop like huffing and puffing. Can't stop crying. You're curled up in a ball. I've had an anxiety attack actually before. And my muscles like physically like tensed up. And it was like an hour long. And I was like, I couldn't stop crying.
And
it was
don't
hard
know what's
to breathe.
Happening to yourself.
And the next day my muscles were so sore from like clenching up like that tightly.
Yeah.
So and also the stigma of medication. And I mean, you touched on it, like in terms of like people seem to have their like perspectives on it,
and everyone
and it's hard.
Feels okay with. Well, a lot of people in my life, I guess, felt it was okay to jump in and say, "Well, you don't need it to function. Like you don't need it," and I'm like, "Well, you don't get it." I'm like, and I never said that to them because I would never. Go against, and I'm like, okay. But it makes you so frustrated.
Yes.
Because you're like, you don't understand.
You feel isolated.
Yeah. And I'm like,
the understanding.
If you don't feel what I'm feeling right now, don't pipe in and say something, I don't need it because you have no idea. Yeah. Maybe say, are you sure you need it? Or do you think you would ever try
There's
something
so
else?
There's so many different ways to ask the question and approach it. That's another thing is like, hopefully with what we're talking about, you can like, people can just a little more careful. Like, it's not like dancing around the subject. It's like, trying to understand about it. And that's another key thing that it came out from all of this, understanding, like empathy, understanding and validating and just like listening to what the person is saying, but actually listening. Like
and asking
actually,
questions.
Yes,
like
asking questions.
If you don't get it, ask.
Yeah.
Like if you genuinely are curious, it helps those people going through it to let out what they're feeling and talk about it. So you asking is great. Like
it's great. And it's going to help you so much with understanding. So with this document, for me, it's meant to just, so people, sometimes they're scared to ask. They don't want to ask. They aren't sure how to ask. This, hopefully, when I can finally compile this fully even more, it's, and then the idea is to then provide a link and let people come to it and see it. And who knows, maybe at some point comment on it or add little notes and stuff about their experiences, whatever it may be. It's all in one spot. So there's less questions to ask. So like I'm going to have, for example, a section just purely defining out bipolar, purely defining out anxiety. And it's going to be like obviously defining based on other people's experiences, but people who have been diagnosed with these illnesses, right? Like
real life examples.
It's real life examples.
Now I want to make sure we get a few more in.
So
can you lead us into another story?
Let's go back through. We can actually, let's touch on, let's see, which one should I do? I want to say we can do the,
what direction do you want to send?
I know I want to see, because like there's a couple. I think I may go with the anxiety, because I think anxiety is a big one. I'm going to touch quickly on anxiety, and I'm also going to talk about Tourette's / BPD, because those are ones that people don't know much about at all. So with the anxiety, I mentioned it before, something I noticed a lot with the responses. I'll give this one a little bit more of a generalization for anxiety, just based on the compiled answers I got.
We kind of touched on it.
Yeah, exactly. What I was going to say is
good leeway into it.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's a difference in terms of the symptoms people face when they actually really are struggling with anxiety versus like maybe more mild versions of anxiety, or maybe a little bit less so anxiety.
Or just getting anxious.
Yes, getting anxious. Cause like, and it's something that like, the reason I find it different, and that's the key point from anxiety for this, people experience more like episodes, like it's lengthy, it's feelings of pure, like, and it goes into depression too. It's like, you start to feel isolated, purposeless, and you don't know how to handle it. And then your brain spirals. That's what I consider anxiety, the spiraling of the brain, which maybe you can add to this a little bit, because that's what I find is the biggest issue.
I totally agree. And I think that spiraling and stuff makes you feel a little bit more alone and lonely, because you're like, I could be surrounded by people, and if you go through that episode or that whatever, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so alone. Like I know that I'm not alone, and I understand that. But you feel, I don't know what it is, but at least for me, I feel that's so what it is for me too. By myself and like isolated.
Yeah. And I think that's just such an important point, that it's like, with all of these, the way I define them as like, it shows that it's like an illness, is that it's not, the key for me is that yes, anxiety can be triggered by stuff, but people with anxiety also can just get it out of nowhere. That's what I see as a mental, like the illness aspect.
I remember
it comes out of nowhere. It's not triggered. The trigger is a key word that we always use, but it's not triggered, right?
Yeah. I remember one time, just because you said that, I want to give an example because this just came to my head right away. When I didn't know I had anxiety, I went to Aritzia, and it was during COVID, and like, you're wearing your mask, this and that. And I just started sweating, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like what's going on here? And then I just got like, so like something came over me, and I'm like, what is happening? And like, I had to leave the store. I was just started crying, and I'm like, I'm not sad. I'm shopping. This is my favorite thing to do in the world.
Doesn't make any sense. And it just doesn't make sense. Yeah. Right?
So that's definitely an example of when nothing triggered me and that, came over. So
let's quickly touch on this last part, because I know we want to just finish up almost. The last part is talking a little bit about Tourette's and BPD.
Yeah. And I don't know much about this, so I'm excited to hear.
BPD, even people don't even know like the terminology of what BPD fully it stands for. It's borderline personality disorder. Okay. So some of the things that come with this, and that I think this is a really tough one, is because like you said, don't know about it. We don't know much about it in terms of the information's out there, but we don't really have as many people that have it. There's less people that have it, but
I haven't heard it as much.
Right.
So
which is fair. But a lot of now this one I've noticed, especially with like the friend that talked to me about this, we'll call them Adam. Adam really, it's really extreme, the emotions you feel with BPD, at least from what he's told me. Like he had like very heightened emotions, feelings of depression, dysmorphia is what he described it as, which I still need to like body dysmorphia. And I think, yeah, which is interesting. It's like, you know, like when we look at ourselves in the mirror, it's like you see something, but I think in this case, it's like, I don't really know too much about that aspect, but see like stuff like this, it's like, I want to now learn and actually ask more questions about. It also brings, and then he had like the issues of the twitches from Tourette's, which people don't realize how much of like an issue that becomes because it's in all of your conversations. It's all the time, right? So
must be so frustrating.
It's like, it's hard for us to understand. And the biggest one that's like very hard is the suicidal thoughts. And like they're extreme. And like those are the intrusive thoughts. I get the intrusive thoughts too, but like to a huge extent. Like that's why with ones like with BPD, it's like medication is also very important. To be honest, important at that point. Because those thoughts invading your mind, it's scary. And it's like and this is like, think that like I can see where it makes sense where it's like personality disorder, because it's like you don't even know who you are. Like these things are invading your mind. They're hijacking you, talking about suicidal thoughts.
Oh my gosh.
Right. And you don't know how to handle that. And it's almost like there's something invading your body. And it's like, how do you deal with that? And for example, he took medications as like a means of dealing with it. And then honestly, like a lot of the things he did was stayed away from like drinking and drugs and stuff like that, and focused, like did that as a pairing with the medication, like doing the healthy exercises, because you can't just do one or the other. You need it to come together. There's more than one thing. You can't only rely on the medications. That's going to provide you with a foundation, but you need to still be working hard against it as well.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
There's so much more, but the good part is that what we are about to mention at the end anyway is I'm going to provide a link to this when I've like fully compiled this. We'll add it to like the bio in the podcast, but you've done so much research on it. So we're definitely going to make it a point to put in the bio and everything, a link to a spot where you can find it. And also we're going to provide some links that you found that are to give more information or help you with anything. So this is us going out of our way, and especially Jason, to give you more spots to help, find more answers or more information. So this is only what he's providing, but also there is so much out there. Yes.
And there is more professional help. And I want to make that so apparent, because if anything is triggering in this, talk to someone, and maybe you will figure out that there is something that could help any of your emotions out there that you're going through. So be open about it, have that open conversation, and let's all talk about it. But let's have a kind of lighthearted end to this. Let's give some tips of what has helped us with, what we're going through. So maybe we'll go 1 for 1.
Yeah, sounds good. You start this time.
Okay. For me, the first thing that I kind of thought of when we talked about doing this was I kind of spiral a lot when I'm just in a house. If I'm staying inside for too long or haven't left the house, I need sunlight. Go outside, go for a walk, be around people. At least for me, that helps. Go outside. Just
and
fresh
it sounds
air.
so simple, but to be honest, sometimes I'm so stubborn about it.
I know, same.
And actually, like, if you don't mind, I can kind of hop on this as well. Go ahead. I think one of the hard parts, especially with the illness aspect of it, is that because when I've tried things before and they only work temporarily, it makes it even harder to go and then do them again, even temporarily as a temporary fix, because I'm so frustrated because I want the bigger picture to be fixed, or not fixed, but like stabilized. It's
almost a bit of a waste of time.
Yes, it's exactly how I feel. And it's frustration. And then it brings in more negative feelings and emotions, right?
I totally agree.
So
What's your tip?
I mentioned it before, but I'll make it clear because now that we're talking about that in this section, it's actually something my friend laid out perfectly, Victoria. She said, advocate for yourself. So through this process,
explain that.
Yeah, it's good. It's such a good point. I have been like going so far to my way to find these psychiatrists. I've talked to like 5 different psychiatrists, which that's a huge number because it's hard to get to these psychiatrists.
Yes. Yeah.
Talk to as many people as possible, because they're not gonna, like, the thing is, they're not gonna know the answer. But the more people who are educated, who have seen other people in these experiences that you talk to, the more likely you are going to head towards the path you're looking for. So, but it requires you to do these things, to talk on a podcast, to post on my Instagram, to talk about my mental health issues all the time. But you have to do it, and you have to be okay with doing it. So that's like a key thing for me. And now the one thing I do understand is that's hard to do, but it can be done in different ways. So it doesn't mean just only doing like a podcast. It does mean, though, finding a way to reach out to a psychiatrist. Like, there's things that it's just like, you just really got to push for yourself. And the system's so backed up to try and get psychiatrists. Ask for requisitions to about 17 different psychiatrists. Like, this is what you have to do for yourself.
And I'm glad you said that, because it's so true. Like, you do really have to advocate for yourself. Like, the only person at the end of the day that's going to be 100% for you is you.
Yep.
And like, if you want to get to that good place, you're going to have to, step out of your comfort zone and do that.
Yep.
So I'm really glad you mentioned that. Okay. So my next one was, for me, sometimes I get overwhelmed with all those things coming into my head, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. So I've come to this whole thing of lists. I have 5 calendars, Sarah,
same.
and checking them off
Guilty.
and making sure that like everything's on pen and paper or in my phone notes. Like, that's helped me so much. It's cleared my mind. It's, dumped my thoughts into something. It doesn't have to just be up in my head.
Yep. That's a great point. That's such a great point. Let's do one more, because then we'll talk about the final thoughts.
Yep.
Does that work?
Yep.
I know I'm like guiding the.
No, you should have your own podcast. Take it away.
I said, honestly, not a bad idea. Maybe down the road, not going to lie. So the last one, again, this actually comes back to Victoria again. So like, this is why I really highlighted. Oh, we love Victoria like so much. This is why it's so important to talk to people. It's such a beautiful feeling as well.
It really is.
So the other one I would say is have self-compassion. And like, honestly, this process is tough. It's taxing. You need to be there for yourself. I've heard you say it before. When you're really anxious, you're like, I'm here for me. Like, you need to, like, and that's big. It's not something to be understated. It's so important that you're there for you.
100%.
Because you can't, as much as we want all the help around us, we can't rely on it, because you never know. And they may not know how to help. And you got to still be there for yourself. And you got to do things like you've talked about. Go and get some sunlight and do things that are healthy and positive for yourself.
A huge realization for me was, I think it was a TikTok, and I know TikTok, but
we love our good TikTok.
Yeah, we love a good TikTok. But one TikTok said, it was a motivational speaker, and she said, no one is going to be there for you. Obviously there are going to be people there for you, but no one's going to be there for you 100% than you. Like, no one's going to tell you to wake up at 6 a.m. to go work out. No one's going to wake up. No one's going to tell you to wake up to go to work. No one's going to tell you to eat healthy. No one's going to tell you to do these things that are going to put you in a good mind space. So it really is important to be there for yourself, because you are your biggest and supporter. You're the biggest pusher. Like, you got to push yourself. Don't depend on other people.
And you need to be okay to mess up along the way. Like,
100%.
It's okay.
We're only human.
We're like, we need to, because our first reaction is like to get so like it's almost like we're teaching ourselves by getting angry at ourselves. Like, and that's not going to progress. Like, we need to be compassionate towards ourselves.
Yep. And I used to get so mad if I didn't take everything off of my list, but now I'm like, I'm only human.
Yes.
I'm only human.
That's the thing about the list. It's like a nice feeling when you check it off, but then you're like, oh, I need to get them all done. It's like, no, you don't.
You can move some till tomorrow or later this week.
Or not even have to do them at all. Because who knows? Because maybe along the way, though, you realize I didn't actually even need to really do this. That's not a priority.
Yeah.
Because it's like you set out this thing you had, this idea of a goal that you wanted to do. And then you keep going, and like a week along, you're like, actually, that wasn't right. That wasn't realistic. That wasn't what I was looking for.
Absolutely. Right? 100%. Okay, so I want you to do this one. Give me a summary of just kind of what you want people to take away from this.
Yes. Okay. Awesome. I think that the key, so what I even wrote this out as an overlapping theme amongst all the responses that I got.
Okay,
the key thing, this will kind of like, it's nice because like you said, it like sums it all up.
Okay.
So I want people to try and understand illnesses that they don't understand, try and validate and accept that people are feeling certain ways because of illnesses and because of not illnesses, but understand, listen, and listen. Like you need to be there for these people. And the next thing is, like, feeding off of that, ask the next questions. Say, what can I do to help you? Like we talked at the very beginning, like we got the awareness spread, but now we need to ask those second questions. What can I do to help? What is it you felt? Anything along those lines. Obviously, like, being cautious that some people aren't going to be ready to share that. You can obviously always preface it, but so many of my friends are like, no, it's fine. I don't mind. Like, I'll talk about it. Like, not that hard.
A lot more people than you think.
No, more people than you think. Honestly, people, like 78 people on Instagram responding to me in different ways. Like, don't even know some of them. Like, so cool. Advocate for yourself, self-compassion, and the key is take from this what you can. Take from this what resonates with you. It can be none of it. It can be all of it. It can be one clip of it. We talk a lot very quickly as well. I'm like trying to slow down
myself. Hope you kept up.
But just take what you can from this, and also, most importantly, I will have this all condensed. So there will be a spot to look for this information. So we've kind of touched it. We've got a big deep touch on it. We went
just
in depth,
started.
But there's so much more. And actually, it's a good point. We talked about it. Go ahead, say this.
No, yes. You go ahead.
No, you got this.
So we are hoping that we can, we're both leaving to go to our master's program, and which is both abroad. I'm in the States, you're in Europe.
Yep.
So we're taking off, and that's going to be a big jump, and we're definitely going to be going through things during that. So we want and hopefully can find a time to touch on how that was for us and how we cope with these things. And we will find a way.
I think we will. I'm going to buy a microphone.
Yeah, we'll buy mics.
I think because we will face different challenges with our mental health along the way, and maybe your anxiety may come back more, and then you have to find new ways to cope with it. That's another thing, is like, mental illnesses are constantly evolving. We have to keep finding new coping mechanisms for them.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better.
Okay.
But yes, I hope everyone took something from this and it resonated with you or other people in your life, and you can share it with them. But yes, stay tuned for our next episode on our updates.
Yes,
and I hope you all had an amazing week. Thank you, Jason, for coming on.
Also, peep it out. We got this down to almost exactly an hour.
Good for us.
Which we were like, we'll do 30 minutes. We'll do 45 minutes. No, we were going to do an hour. It was meant to be.
It was meant to be. So thank you all for listening, and have an amazing rest of your week.